Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Kimberly. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, great. I'm so relieved there haven't been any major technical issues yet, although I shouldn't speak too soon. I'm sure people are just going to kind of slowly trickle in, um, but I'll just get started anyway since it's 11 o'clock. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into this Instagram live session with myself and CAWP visiting practitioner Kimberly Peeler-Allen. So this is the first in a series of Instagram lives that we're hosting to accompany the rollout of our most recent report called Money Matters in the 50 States. And this report was co-authored with CAWP senior scholar Dr. Kira Sambon-Matsu and myself. And it is the latest in our series on money and politics that looks at really the intersection of gender and campaign finance. So in this report, we focused on statewide races, and we looked at women both as candidates and women as donors to political campaigns. And we were fortunate enough to be able to work with data from OpenSecrets, almost 2 million individual contribution records. And this report really documents sort of the extent of the inequality in women's political giving and much more. So the report can be found on the CAWP website and will be linked in our Instagram stories and in the bio. So I just had to do my quick plug for the report. And I just want to introduce and give a little bit of bio on Kimberly. So I'm really excited to be talking to Kimberly Peeler-Allen today. Kimberly is a visiting practitioner at CAWP, and she has a very impressive and long resume involving the intersection of race, gender, and politics. But I'll give you the sort of abridged version. So she's the co-founder of Higher Heights, a national organization building the political power and leadership of Black women. And she also has extensive experience in political fundraising and event planning. She served as the finance director for Letitia James's successful bid to become public advocate of the city of New York. In her free time, and I use that in quotes, air quotes, she wrote a book called Activist Mama about her life experience as a political organizer. So without further delay, and so we can get into the conversation, I'm going to jump into my questions for you, Kimberly. So my first question is, in the Money Matters report that we released today, and in our previous report on governor's races, we find that women are underrepresented as donors to statewide executive candidates, including offices like Attorney General and Secretary of State candidates. So there's this gender gap in political giving. So my question for you is, why do you think men are more likely than women to give to political campaigns? What have you seen as your experience, in your experience as a fundraiser? Are there societal or structural factors at work? Why do you think some individuals are more likely to give than others? And I realized that was actually like 3 questions. So. Sorry.
Yeah, that was like 3 questions, but that's okay. So great
excited.
Yeah. So great to be here and to be talking about this report, because I think, any work that is done to kind of break down and really analyze the disparities, and first recognize the disparities and then really start to analyze them, then we can break them down and really level the playing field. I think there's a lot at play in terms of why women are not necessarily donors or large or significant donors to kind of what's considered down ballot races. A lot of it comes from the fact that women are still not the usual suspects for donors in in politics, it is changing, but with that, it is definitely the races that are getting more attention, the federal races that everybody understands, the gubernatorial races. We're definitely seeing more women give to those races because it is they're covered more in the media, as well as it's very clear as to what the roles and responsibilities are for those candidates, and the impact of these elections are very clear. Down ballot, whether it is Secretary of State, Attorney General, Treasurer, Comptroller, or even state legislature, they're more obscure, and actually in many states they're not always tasked with doing the same thing. So the universal understanding of these roles is different, and it requires a lot of education around that. And I think there are it is a mindset of being able to influence, impact, and change policy that motivates donors in general, and being able to have more women who are clued in on what's happening, and really be able to see that their dollars matter. And then also, the report also looks at what happens when there is a woman who is running for these positions. And we see that women generally give more to other women candidates. So it is important to bring more women into the process, both as donors and as candidates, because they feed off of each other.
Right, great. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And this is kind of a follow-up that's related to sort of everything you just said. But our report really documents the extent of this inequality in women's political giving, though we find that women are better represented as donors to Democratic candidates, rather than Republican candidates. So my question to you with regard to sort of that discrepancy by party is, what do you think can be done to sort of persuade women to get more involved in these races as donors? And then also, why do you think there's this gap between Democrats and Republicans in terms of women's representation as donors?
Well, I think there's two pieces to this. As you stated in your question, that I think there is a sense. I'll take the last part first, of wanting to support the best candidate, and not necessarily being perceived on the Republican side as supporting a woman just because she's a woman, not necessarily because she is the most qualified, even though the two may in many cases coincide. So the perception that a woman is writing a check to a woman candidate, a Republican woman candidate, may be felt like, oh, well, I don't want to be perceived as raising my lady flag, so to speak. And so there is that challenge where it is, through all of this, we are trying to change social norms and gender norms, and what is expected and perceived as normal or appropriate roles for women and women donors, and who people are supporting and why. So there's a lot to unpack there. And then to see how these women as candidates and as donors interact in the process, and getting them to really see why we need to have more voices supporting, more people supporting from different angles, helps elevate the issues, challenges, and opportunities of a wider swath of the American electorate, by supporting candidates who have shared or lived experiences that you want to have as part of the conversation.
Right. I have so many follow-up questions to everything you just said, but I also want to make sure we touch on all sort of the different aspects of the report, and also your expertise. So I'll kind of move on to the next question. So, and this isn't really specific to the report that was released today, but just in CAWP's data generally on women office holders, we find that, not surprisingly, women are underrepresented as statewide candidates and elected officials, with women of color being particularly underrepresented. So my question related to that is, what are some of the barriers that women candidates face, but also specifically some of the barriers that women of color face? And again, I'm going to ask a second question. How can we move the needle for women of color candidates when the numbers have just been sort of stagnant?
Well, I think for women overall, whether they are BIPOC or white women, the challenge has been pipeline, and also putting women in positions where the transferable skills are seen and uplifted. And we still are, in a white male dominated electoral space where our elected leadership has been white and male for 200 and almost 250 years. So being able to change what leadership looks like and being able to say, oh, this woman who has been leading this particular legislative committee or has been leading this this small city in our state has the transferable skills and has what it takes to be a statewide elected official, I think is definitely something that needs to happen. And along with that, it's also the question of, who determines what viability is. And viability also really has a lot to do with how much money you're able to raise. How much are you able to have in your coffers to communicate with voters in a way that will be effective so that you can win on election day? And the two kind of go, it's like a cycle, how transferable are your skills? How are you seen as someone who could lead? And does that then generate resources that allow you to show that you can lead? So you have to break the cycle of saying, you know what, women, regardless of their ethnic background, should be given the same the same opportunity that a male candidate is, because they have, this is their resume. And being able to look at that and say, okay, I'm not just going to vote for this person, but I'm going to put resources behind them because it is not just their lived experience or their resume on paper that is valuable, but it is also being able to walk at that intersection of gender and race that can make sure that there's good policy and good leadership, whether it is in the Secretary of State's office or the Attorney General's office or the gubernatorial office, that we need to make sure that we are really having a representative leadership across the board. And that requires that women have a substantial place at the table.
Right. Everything you just kind of laid out for us here made me think of a quote from Stacey Abrams that we included in our governor's report about how, white men are just used to asking for huge sums of money. And when women and people of color sort of do the same to fund their campaigns, it's like, as Stacey said, it's kind of like we're made to feel as if we're sort of begging. So I think, that's part of it too. So my next question is about something we find in the Money Matters report. We find that statewide candidates, women candidates, are less likely to finance their own campaigns. And we also find that women raise more money from small contributions than men do. And we kind of make the case that both of these aspects of campaign finance kind of indicate that it's harder for women to raise money, right? So women kind of have to hustle harder to get those small donations rather than those big PAC donations. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that finding and how we might sort of level the playing field for women's fundraising.
Well, I think it was not at all surprising when I read that part of the report because, just thinking through how wealth has been handed down in this country generation to generation. Early in its days, it was male to male, male heir to male heir, and you had to marry off your daughters because they wouldn't have anything otherwise. And that we're in, we're not in that place anymore. thankfully, but there is still a lack of wealth for women. And then I think there's also, for women who are married, some are, have, they have to feel like they have to have a consultation with their partner who may not support or may not agree with, women, the candidate that this particular woman wants to support. So she could financially have the wherewithal to write a max out check to a attorney general candidate that she likes, but there are always other parts of the conversation where, unfortunately, we're just in many households, there's still a dominant of like whatever the husband wants. That is changing as women are becoming more breadwinner in the household, and being able to determine those dollars. And then there's also the calculus that many women go through of like, I have school tuition, the kids need shoes, I'm saving up to help take care of my parents, or all of the other pieces of our lives that have financial implications on our budget. So we are less likely to write those larger checks. So we are seeing that I tell women all the time, just like you put together your budget of how much you're going to spend on your mortgage and your groceries and everything else, put together a political budget. Think about who's in your electoral cycle and who you may want to support, and allocate some money there. And that is just the money that you spend. Just like you may not have a second thought about your grocery bill. This is just your monthly political allocation, and spend that out. And we're seeing more and more women write checks along those lines. And then on the candidate side, in terms of what they are asking for and what people are willing to give, we're seeing less of this, where we're seeing women who are being, Stacey definitely showed how it could be done, to ask for the large checks and say, this is what I need and this is why I need it, and this is I'm not raising this money to go buy a pair of shoes, I'm raising this money to change our community and change our state. And that mindset shift allows for the freedom to ask for larger contributions without the guilt of asking for a larger contribution. And then also the higher likelihood that they will actually get that contribution because of what they are asking people to support and to buy into. So there is definitely the calculus of, I've sat with candidates who have said, oh, I can't ask for this amount of money from this person because I know that they have this going on and this going on and this going on. So I'm going to ask for a significantly less amount, or I'm not going to call them at all. And I would tell them all the time, you don't know the ins and outs of their checkbook. And until you ask, you won't know, and you may be pleasantly surprised. So it never hurts to ask. And at the end of the day, the worst that can happen is they say no.
Yeah, exactly. So we're already running up against the clock here, but I wanted to end on sort of a positive note. So our report does include some encouraging news for women candidates. It's not all doom and gloom. For example, we find that in similar types of races, like open seats, for example, women and men raise similar amounts of money, women and men candidates. So what would you tell women thinking about running for statewide office to sort of encourage them to run?
You can do it. You can absolutely do it. Just be very clear on why you're doing it and what it will take to get you there. And then also, always focus on the governing, because campaigning is one piece of it, but if you govern well, you will be reelected. So be very clear on that piece, and just, put together a strong team, be very clear about what your values are and who will likely support you, and then go after it and go get it.
Awesome. All right. Well, I feel like I could definitely ask about 20 follow-up questions, but since we're running up against the clock, I want to respect your time. But thank you so much, Kimberly, for joining us and giving us your insight. It's just so valuable. So is there anything else you want to add before we sort of wrap up here?
I would just say that it is a great report that really breaks down a lot of what I think has been, in some cases, a misnomer about the opportunities that exist for women to run for statewide office. It can be done, and it should be done. And if you just understand the motivations of donors and your own motivation for why you're running or why you're supporting a candidate, we will definitely see more women running and winning and leading in this country.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. And I'll do one last plug for the report. You can find it on the CAWP website. And I think we included the link in our Instagram bio, and it should be on our stories as well. So definitely check it out. And thank you so much again, Kimberly.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.